Ready to talk to Alex Bozich, editor, co-founder of InsideTheHall.com, get his thoughts on IU so far this season. They did not look great in the second half last night against Wisconsin. They end up losing by a score of 92-78 in a game where, again, it was close at the first half. At the end, it was about a 6-point difference in favor of Wisconsin. Then they came out, and Wisconsin did what they've been doing to people all season, and IU just didn't have an answer for it. And let's bring in Alex on the Menards Studio Hotline. Alex, thanks for the time. Appreciate it. You are the co-founder, the editor of InsideTheHall.com. You can also follow Alex on Twitter at Inside the Hall. What I saw last night almost seemed to be a tale of two halves for IU. Alex, is that a fair assessment? They went into half down, I think, 6. And then what changed? What happened? What did Wisconsin do, or what did IU change that caused Wisconsin to pull away there in the second half from what you saw?
Well, first, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. The first half really actually kind of started like the second half, maybe to a lesser extent in the first half. I know they fell behind 9-0 and were kind of able to dig out of that hole. And then they went into the break trailing by 8, I think it was. And then really Wisconsin came out the second half just pretty much scoring every possession, went on a 13-0 run. Indiana called a timeout, I think, after 6 straight points to try to stop the momentum a little bit. But from there, it was, Indiana's defense right now is in conference play is 13th out of 14 teams, and depending on what metrics you look at, Wisconsin's the first or second best offensive team in the whole country. So they pretty much scored at will. They obviously have the size advantage inside with Kaminsky and Decker and Hayes, and Wisconsin was just smart about it. They took the ball to the basket. Indiana really doesn't have any resistance at the rim right now, and the onslaught just kind of, the lead got up to 32 points at one point, and then Indiana kind of rallied late and cut it to make it a little bit more respectable, but it wasn't really that close.
Well, I'll tell you what I watched last night, especially there in the second half, there were times where it just seemed like Indiana's defense just – I don't know if it was just the thought process derailed or whatever, but there were so many times when they were drawn to the perimeter and Kaminsky would just make a quick little spin move to the inside, and there wasn't a soul around him underneath the basket. It was just a quick and easy pass from the top of the key, and he'd just jump up and slam it down. Is that can IU – I don't know how I want to word this. Can they – they've got to. Well, I don't know how to say it. To be honest with you, seriously,
they're little.
Well, they are little, and it's how do they deal with that? I mean, because I've read some of your stuff on InsideTheHall.com, and there's guys that still seem to think that IU could be a 6 or a 7 seed come the tournament, but they're going to run into teams that outsize them like this. They had the same issue with Purdue last week. I mean, what can they do? What can they do to try and get around that size disadvantage?
Well, the good news is there's not very many more teams in the Big Ten that are going to have the size that Wisconsin and Purdue have, so that's one thing that I would say. Also, it's really hard to explain. This is one of the most lopsided teams that I've ever, seen, that I've kind of seen IU have from a standpoint of this is an offense that right now is easily a top 10 offense in the country, and the defense is somewhere between 250 and 300, depending on what you look at. So it's pretty much this team at this point is what it is defensively, and they're going to have to outscore teams to win. I mean, there's no magic solution. There's no, Cody Zeller's not going to come back to school and, take over the paint. I mean,
could we figure out a way to make that happen?
They're going to have Hunter Mosquera-Brea come back here in a couple weeks, and I think that's going to help a little bit as far as the post defense. But this is a team that really is going to have to shoot well from the perimeter, not turn the ball over, and hope that it can outscore teams. And I think in the Big Ten right now, the Big Ten's down. Indiana's actually been an underdog in 7 of their 10 Big Ten games so far, and they're 6-4. And their schedule the rest of the way is pretty favorable. They got 5 at home, and they're 4-0 in Big Ten play so far in Assembly Hall. So I think that they've got that going for them. But it's just you wonder what the ceiling is for this team, especially if come Selection Sunday, if they do get in, if you see a team sitting there on the other side of the bracket, with them that's got a good 7-footer or some good size inside, because that's not going to be a good matchup for this team.
Well, the Indiana was without James Blackman Jr. last night with the ankle injury, so
Right.
Obviously they lose some scoring there. Depth-wise, they're not real deep, but this team is just, we've said it all season. I'm sure you have as well. They're kind of living and dying by this three-pointer because they don't have a lot of size in the paint. How far can that take them? Because it just seems like if they can't shoot 50, 60% from three-point range, they don't have a chance.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it can only take them so far. A lot of it's going to depend on matchups. At this point, I think they'd be solidly in the tournament, and I think their schedule is favorable enough down the stretch, and the bubble is weak enough that they're going to probably be able to get in, assuming they don't collapse here down the stretch. But it's a fair question to kind of wonder, what is this a team that could get to the Sweet 16? I don't see it right now. I could see them winning a game and, maybe giving somebody a scare in the second round. But, if you look at the NCAA tournament, a lot of times the game slows down and, you've got to be able to stop somebody in the half court. And when Indiana's, won on the road in the Big Ten, they did beat Nebraska and Illinois, which those are kind of two wins that I think they can kind of look back on and say, if we didn't get these two, we wouldn't be in the position that we were in right now, because they haven't really done anything else on the road. But they're going to have to be able to, stop teams down the stretch and get some stops in key spots. And right now, they're just, like you said, they're living and dying by the three, and when the threes aren't going in, Michigan State game is a perfect example. You see how things can spiral out of control quickly.
Talking to Alex Bozich. He is the editor and co-founder of InsideTheHall.com. It's Ford and O'Brien, ESPN Evansville 105.3, and online, ESPNEvansville.com. And Alex, I think this team, despite, they've had their ups and downs, and sometimes you watch them play like a Maryland a couple of weeks ago, or a week or so back at Assembly Hall, and a Maryland team that was highly ranked at the time, and they had a pretty good run there, and a team, they upset Maryland there. They upset Ohio State at home a couple of weeks ago when Ohio State was ranked at that time. And then they go on the road and they lose to Purdue and they lose to Ohio State on the road. And it's one of those, what team is going to show up here night in and night out? But despite that, they have exceeded expectations, yes?
So far, yes. I would agree. I don't think there's any way to look at this season as anything other than a surprise so far. Most of the preseason projections, I picked them to finish 8th in the Big Ten. I think right now they're, there's a pretty big logjam at the top, but I have a hard time seeing them finish anywhere worse than 5th or 6th at this point. So yes, I would say they've exceeded expectations to this point. They've got some good wins. I think they've got 4 wins probably right now over teams that are going to make the tournament: Butler, SMU, Ohio State, and Maryland. They just got to continue to kind of build on that. And one thing I will say, I know we've talked a lot about the defensive problems, but from an offensive standpoint, there's not many teams in the country that are more fun to watch than Indiana. As when they get it rolling and they're hitting threes, and that Maryland game's the perfect example. They hit 15 threes, and when the ball's moving, they're not turning it over, and they're just finding the open man. They can put on a clinic.
Yeah, I agree. And I watching that game last night. They seem to have they fall into the bad habit too. Like when they find themselves getting down, and it was to a point where Wisconsin there in the second half had kind of ballooned into that double-digit lead, where as opposed to maybe early in the game where they're passing it around, they're trying to create shots, it became just pass it to Yogi Ferrell, let him drive down the lane, and then not even down the lane, drive down the court, and then as soon as he gets to the top of the key, I'm just going to jump up and shoot a three-pointer. Like they completely abandon the idea. They're so easy to fall into a habit of, we just need to keep making shots and hopefully one of them will go down. And there's something to be said about that, but when you're facing a team like Wisconsin, who was scoring, as you had mentioned there, they're one of the best offenses in the country. You can't give up. You can't just throw a shot up there and give them that rebound and let them to get back down the floor and put more points on the board. When it comes down to Selection Sunday, and depending on how the rest of the season goes for the Hoosiers, how much of a factor is a loss like that Eastern Washington game earlier in the season?
I think it's a little bit of a factor, but also, Eastern Washington, I believe, in the top 100 of the RPI. They're projected to win their league. I don't think it's going to hurt as much as, say, like a Michigan will be hurt with NJIT and Eastern Michigan, or even Purdue losing to Gardner-Webb in North Florida. I think the Eastern Washington loss is obviously going to, if it came down to a scenario where they were a bubble team and fighting for a final spot, I think it's something that could come into play. But at this point, it's an early loss. It's if they continue to take care of business at home, I don't think it's going to be a factor. I think it only comes into play if they were somehow to only win 2 or 3 more games, probably 3 more. I think if they get to 20 wins, they got to feel pretty good about their chances to get in, and that would just mean going 4-4 the rest of the way and getting double-digit wins in the Big Ten.
They got Michigan coming into Assembly Hall this Sunday. As you mentioned, they play very good basketball at home. What do you see in this ballgame Sunday?
Well, I think it'll be interesting to see if James Blackman's back. I think he will be. His injury happened in the second half of the Rutgers game, and he actually, I remember it happening, and he kind of winced and went down and then kind of went back and just kept playing. And I think it was one of those situations where, he kept going and it didn't swell up really until after the game, and he realized it was a little bit more significant. And I think they're just being a little bit, careful with him, holding him out. But as far as Michigan goes, they've been playing really well lately, despite the fact that, Karis LeVert's out for the season. They've Derek Walton, their point guard, has been out recently and on crutches, and they're really playing with a lot of freshmen, and they even played 2 walk-ons in the first half at Michigan State and took that game to overtime. So Indiana's been historically very good against Michigan at home under Tom Crean. I think the only year that they lost to Michigan in Assembly Hall was Crean's first year, and that first or second year, and I think and they needed overtime to beat them then. So, it's a nationally televised game. They've got 4 or 5 days to prep. Indiana's usually pretty good in those situations, so I see it as a game this is really a game that they need to get, because next week they go to Maryland before coming home and then playing Minnesota and Purdue. So if they could get this game, I think they've got a pretty good shot to get 10 or 11 Big Ten wins and kind of solidify their spot in the tournament. But Michigan is a team that doesn't turn the ball over. They slow the pace down, even though a lot of people talk about John Beilein teams liking to get up and down. If you look at their possession averages per game, they're one of the slower paced teams in the Big Ten. So Indiana's going to have to take care of the ball and obviously get good shots. But I think the Assembly Hall advantage here should kind of pull them through and get them their 7th win in the conference.
That's Alex Bozich. He's the editor, co-founder of InsideTheHall.com. Give him a follow on Twitter at InsideTheHall as well. Alex, appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Anytime. Appreciate it.